Hello. Let me switch to me. I'm Todd Lefkoe, the chairperson of East-West Connections. Tonight, we're honored to present the discussion on Is the U.S. Losing Soft Power, an essential issue for our changing world. I wish to thank our wonderful co-sponsors, Global Minnesota, the Museum of Russian Art, Zerkalo, the Russian Media, the Minnesota Committee on Foreign Relations, and the brilliant Russian Studies Department of Macalester College. I especially wish to thank our technological geniuses, Catherine Galligan and Sophia Chamael. At the end, I'll also describe our next program on May 1st, which is a very famous film that we'll have a public discussion on, and people will have 4 days to watch it before our program. It's my pleasure now, and truly a pleasure, to present tonight's moderator, the distinguished diplomat, Margot Squire, who will introduce our amazing panel of discussants. Margot, take it away.
Hello. Thank you very much, Todd. And hello, everyone. So first, I'd like to introduce people, then maybe say a few words about what is soft power, and give some examples, then turn to Mary and Ross and have them discuss. I'll ask some questions of them, and then hopefully take some questions from you before this is over. So on my screen to my right, I see Ambassador Ross Wilson. He's a career diplomat who served in over 30 years in the U.S. Foreign Service in a number of countries, the Czechoslovakia, the USSR, Australia. He served as ambassador in Turkey and Azerbaijan, chargé or acting ambassador in Turkey, Georgia, 20 months in Afghanistan. He held 20 senior positions in Washington, working for secretaries of state. When he retired, he managed the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. He has taught at George Washington University and at Carleton College, and serves on boards for the Eurasia Foundation, American Voices, and the Institute of Turkish Studies. And he is currently chair of the board of Global Minnesota, a local organization we'll talk a little bit about. Mary McBride is a producer, musician, cultural envoy whose career exemplifies how music and art plays a vital role in creating lasting global connections. She has performed in more than 30 countries as a band leader and cultural envoy for the U.S. Department of State. She also designs and manages international programs in coordination with multiple partners, including the I think it was a couple of years ago, Vysotsky and Dillon, a multi-day event in partnership with East-West Connections and Macalester College, included live concerts and panels examining the cultural impact of the Soviet singer, songwriter, actor, balladeer, poet Vladimir Vysotsky and the American singer, songwriter Bob Dylan. She's also produced documentaries, including one that celebrates the global reach of go-go music, and Tradition, which showcases the significant contribution that the Yale Russian Chorus has made in strengthening the relationship between the American and Russian citizens since its first tour to Russia, or the USSR, in 1958. And I have to say that my brother just hosted the Yale Russian Chorus in Washington, D.C. in his home. They all slept on his floor. Wonderful. So in his house. And so close to my heart. And I am Margot Squire, also a retired career diplomat, like Ambassador Wilson, who, in case you don't know, happens to be my husband. I worked in public diplomacy. So with publics and opinion leaders, journalists, academics, cultural leaders, civic organizations in various countries. I started in the press section of the US Embassy in Moscow, and I worked in other embassies and the State Department. And after the USSR broke up, I coordinated the democracy programs for the US government assistance programs, the assistance program to the countries that came out of the USSR. And I currently, since retiring, I've thrown myself into leading tours at art museums in the Twin Cities, the Museum of Russian Art and the Minneapolis Institute of Art, connecting people through arts and supporting organizations like East-West Connections and Global Minnesota. So what is, if we can just jump right in, what is soft power? And why do we even care? Um, Harvard Professor Emeritus Joseph Nye popularized the term soft power. And he did that by talking about two different kinds of power that nations have to influence each other. The hard power that pushes other countries, forcing them to follow your policies and your lead and actions, and soft power that pulls or attracts and persuades people to join you. And so examples of hard power typically are military force, economic sanctions, tariffs, and the threat of these things. Soft power, on the other hand, the pulling and attractive forces consists of some tangible things, policies that other people understand, traditional diplomacy, government to government, USAID assistance programs, global health, disaster relief, international broadcasting programs like the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Asia, Free Asia, that now are less broadcasting and more on the internet and doing things like teaching school to grade 7, 12 grade girls in Afghanistan. South power also consists of more nebulous things like appreciation for shared or desired values and culture. The U.S. gained huge soft power advantages from our form of government, our freedoms, our democracy, free market economics, also from just the appeal of our educational system, and the openness and freedom of our arts and experimentation. These are the kinds of things that attract people and mean that they will listen to you and maybe trust you. And soft power is particularly important today, these types of things. Now that publics wield more power over their governments and governments have to listen to public opinion. And also when we're saturated with sources of information, uh, soft power, direct connections between people can mean the difference between, believing and maybe joining another country's in a joint venture or not, or believing another country's policies. So I don't want you to let the name soft fool you into thinking that this is just this, nebulous nothingness. It's actually been a superpower for the United States. And we're very lucky that we've been, able to draw people to us. And I think an important reason has been through these exchange programs that, started after the Cold War or started after World War II, continued through the Cold War, continue today to create direct connections between people. Edward R. Morrow, who was a big broadcaster, said, was the bridging of the last 3 feet. And, those of you who have been involved in exchanges, thank you very much. It's the direct personal contact, face-to-face conversations, the playing of music, the sharing of joint, art, things like that connect people. And, these multiple exchange programs, I feel very strongly. I'm going to talk about a couple that I've been involved in. Senator Fulbright started the Fulbright program in 1946, and because he was an exchange student. He had been a Rhodes Scholar in the UK. So coming out of World War II, he thought this is a really important thing to keep people getting to know each other by being together. And, since then, some 42 heads of government, 62 Nobel laureates, and 10 elected people have been elected to the U.S. government, to the U.S. Congress. That's just a small slice of what's come out of the Fulbright program. And when I started as director of U.S. government democracy building programs, after to the new independent states coming out of the Soviet Union, the exchange programs were rapidly increased. Initially, a lot of money had gone into the democracy programs that created constitutions, systems of law, supported judges. And, people started realizing that institutions and laws are only as good as the people that, follow them, or and in order to bring reform, you need to actually bring people together and change minds. And so, the Muskie program was named after Senator Muskie, was formed to bring graduate students for master's programs in sort of critically needed areas like, economics and public policy and health, public health. And then the Bradley program, Senator Bradley started a program for high school students, which to this day still goes, the Flex program, because he felt you needed to start even at a younger age. And I have to say that when I was in Washington, I would meet with the Flex students, the high school students from all over different countries who would come to Washington. And I'll never forget, the ones who came for the special civics week, part of the week was meeting with with representatives in Congress, the senators from Ohio where they lived. And I would meet with these young people after they had been, going around to all these meetings. And I just remember one Kazakh telling me, and I told my representative that he needs to look out more for the condition of the roads in Ohio where we live. And I told my representative, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, wait, is this someone from Kazakhstan, or is this, because he's talking about his representative, and when he went back to Kazakhstan, did he take that with him? And that whole idea, you can talk to your representatives, and there are also professional exchanges that have been created and that have gone on through these years, like the International Visitor Leadership Program, which was it's run by embassies around the world, where embassies will identify young up and coming leaders across fields, and they will then send them to the United States for up to 4 weeks. And when I was my very first tour in Moscow, I pulled together an international visitor leadership program for Soviet journalists, from television journalists. And now this was perestroika, but I was skeptical that the end of the 80s that we could get real journalists. Well, the journalists came, there were 8 of them, and they came from all the then republics, or all these different republics. And I remember that the Estonian journalist, when he traveled through the United States, he had a home video camera, and he took pictures of everything. And when he got back to Estonia, he created this a 10-part series that he ran on Estonian television about the United States. And the journalist from Tbilisi, Georgian television, when they were in Atlanta, Georgia, created an exchange that with CNN, which had sort of just started world broadcasting, to give broadcast material from overseas. That was the first of the international relationships. And the Russian journalist was from Leningrad, and she was part of a 2-person team that had the most cutting investigative show on the air at the time. So these people came, I met with them before they came to the United States. They were going to Washington, to San Francisco, to Atlanta, and to Des Moines, Iowa. And they were thrilled about this trip, but they didn't want to go to Des Moines. And then, we didn't want to go to Chicago or New York. And I said, just wait, just wait. And when they came back, Des Moines was the highlight of their tour, because they spent a couple days with broadcast journalists. So they had that professional networking, and they were in American homes. They sat around the table and ate dinner, and that was that personal connection. And they came back, and that made the trip for them. So this soft power of the people-to-people connections, I've seen all through my career, and continuing, and have been a part of. I'd like to now turn this over to Mary, and I'm hoping that you can talk about some of the programs that you were involved in, both personally and your perspective of what soft power means. and why it's important.
Sure. Thanks, Margot. And I just want to say I'm honored to be in conversation with you both. I think before I jump into the topic at hand, I just want to talk about how I got into this work to begin with. I'm primarily a musician. I'm a singer. And as I was touring around the country, the US, playing with my band, I had an opportunity to consider what I could do with my music in a way that would be broader than just going into clubs. And at that time, I started a program called the Home Tour. And the basic premise for the Home Tour was that we would go to places where people were feeling isolated and where people were in need. And we put together a consortium of organizations that provided services and/or shelter for people in need. And that provided us with this incredible access to people that who we otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to play for. And we did that all over the country. And one thing I realized in that is that you have to, in order to create connections that are broader than your own community, you have to look for them. And I was able to do that with the Home Tour. And as a result of the Home Tour, I was asked to serve as a cultural envoy. And my first tour as a cultural envoy was to Russia in 2011. I fast followed with tours to Pakistan, to Afghanistan, to Vietnam, Saudi Arabia. And so I've really had an opportunity to play music in some places where it made perfect sense and other places where it felt more unlikely. But I feel right now that there has never been a more important time for the artistic community. And I know while people are thinking about the divide that we're in and watching the divide deepening, they're coming up with new ideas and creative solutions for us to connect with people in our own country and for us to connect with people outside of the country. So I am excited to have this conversation and to talk about that because I think there's a lot of people right now who are looking at positive ways to make connections.
That's really good to hear. Would you like to just touch on a couple things that, a couple of the programs that you really.
Sure. One of the programs I did with several of the people on this call I know and with East-West Connections was a summit called Vysotsky and Dylan. And the idea was that we would talk about the similarities and differences between Vladimir Vysotsky and Bob Dylan. And at the time we were putting this together, we were talking about artists as monuments, like people who have this lasting impact. And you can think about them in lots of different ways, but we brought a big community together. We had in Minnesota, we had East-West Connections, the Museum of Russian Art was involved, we had Macalester College, and we were very fortunate in that we had the opportunity to bring Russian musicians to collaborate with American musicians. And we did multiple concerts where we had American musicians playing Vysotsky songs, Russian musicians playing Bob Dylan, and we had a whole series of conversations around cultural impact and their respective cultural impacts in their respective countries.
Thank you very much. Ross, how about you? How do you see, or what lens do you use for describing soft power, and can you cite a couple programs?
Sure. Thank you very much, Margot. It's a pleasure and honor to be on this virtual get together with you and to meet Mary McBride virtually. So I think the what you laid out as definitions of what constitutes state soft power are spot on. Of course, they come from Joe Nye. One way I translate that, soft power is a web of things that kind of revolve around relationships, around people-to-people contacts and interactions. Relationships that involve, in particular, mutual respect, consistency, reliability, reputation, all assets that are important for any country who wants to have soft power and wants to wield soft power to influence other countries or influence developments around them, or even just build a better set of prospects for themselves. All of those things end up, I think, being real important. It's I like what what both of you really had to say about kind of the impact and the way these programs actually work. My perception is it's very often any given program, any given person that one's with or sends on a visitor program or scholarship, so forth, it's pretty hard to predict, how that's going to work out and how impactful it will be. Very difficult to quantify the impact of things that cost money at the people-to-people level. Maybe you kind of know it when you see it. In my own personal experience as a senior American diplomat, I personally knew at least 2 presidents and many government ministers and other senior figures in the countries where I served who came here on exchange programs, who had strong relationships in the United States, who had lived here for some period of time. And I have to say, everybody I met with and all of these people in this category could be and were strong and tough advocates for their own country, but they started out in a different place, understanding the United States, what makes us tick, and having a certain level of sympathy for, or at least acceptance of what it was that I came to them to try to seek support for. I think it's unquestionably true that American soft power has made a difference for the United States, for its interests in the world, for the ability of American leaders and diplomats to achieve objectives that were important at the time. And my Exhibit A is the success of U.S. soft power instruments helped substantially to prevent war and to bring an end to the Soviet Empire, which was a signal accomplishment that greatly improved the prospects for security and prosperity in this country, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world. And I dare say it wasn't going to happen through force of arms for reasons that are obvious in the thermonuclear age. It happened in substantial measure because of ties that we and other countries, European countries and others, had nurtured with Russians, encouraging free thought, encouraging all of the values that we think are important, plus a lot of other values, I suppose, that ended up transforming the country. I think a second comment, Margot, you noted the attraction of our free market economy as an asset that adds to our soft power, and I think that's often one that's overlooked, but it's sort of where the rubber meets the road in a lot of important ways. It's almost impossible to overstate how important that economic piece is. The dynamic, adaptable, highly attractive economy and society that America is, based on freedom and opportunity. Many of the most talented people in the world either want to come here or want to be connected with the United States. They vote with their feet, and that gives us some huge assets. Our innovative business community makes it attractive. The dollar and its outsized role in the global economy. It's sometimes used and has recently been used as a more directed tool, not soft power, but more coercive in nature. But it has a lot of soft power attributes as well, and certainly has over the course of my career. You asked for some examples, and I think I'll highlight 3. When I served in Czechoslovakia in the mid-1980s. The government that the Soviets installed after their invasion of that country in 1968 was still in office, and although it was kind of in its waning days. Our ambassador at the time, Jack Matlock, and others came up with the idea of finding an idea for finding ways to better connect with citizens of Czechoslovakia by going around the country and visiting monuments that had been erected to American soldiers killed over the course of World War II, in particular, several gigantic air battles that took place in 1943, 44, and also activities in the western part of Czechoslovakia when Patton's army advanced across the border and toward Pilsen. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people turned out for these events. They wanted to be connected with America. They wanted to protest their country and do it in a way that was at least reasonably safe. It made an impact on them. And that, and I think other activities that we engaged at the time, engagement with the leaders of Charter 77, the opposition movement to the communists led by Václav Havel and others. Havel, of course, subsequently became president and further cemented his and his country's friendship with the United States. Very important. It started with people-to-people activities in a country that was, at least what I experienced, even harsher and more closed than the Soviet Union had been, where I'd served only a few years earlier. Mary talked about the arts, and I'll just kind of give my little piece of that. The State Department runs a program called Art and Embassies. The Art and Embassies program, it's a privately funded activity that brings American art to U.S. ambassador residences overseas. We picked out a whole bunch of things, many of which were American Indian, Native American in origin, which is important to me because, excuse me, my family has a strong Native American background. That was a magnet for people, for Turks to come to see when I served in Ankara. We built on that by bringing out Native American dancers, Native American musicians, and other musicians that came to us through the auspices of American Voices, a nonprofit organization that particularly works in the music sector with young people, and had a big impact for us in both Turkey and also in Azerbaijan. It was important in Turkey because our relations when I arrived were terrible. This was the aftermath of the American entrance into Iraq in 2003, hugely unpopular in Turkey. Relations are so bad that my predecessor was virtually driven out of the country. How are we going to change that? One of the ways we changed it was basically by changing the subject. Talk about something else. Get people into the residence, get people connected with us, with me, with other American diplomats through art, by getting them attracted to something that they found interesting, and then building off of that to try to get a relationship back on track, which we succeeded in at that time. And U.S.-Turkish relations for the following 4, 5, 6 years were arguably as good as at any period in the post-World War II era. I'll close with that.
Thank you very much, both Ross and Mary, for the examples that you gave. I'd like to switch up a little bit and now go to address the question that is the title of this, and ask, is our country, the USA, losing its soft power advantage? Can we reverse that? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. I know that a French survey by Ipsos just this week looked at the UK. It surveyed people in the UK, and sort of only 30% were willing to say that there's a special relationship with the United States, versus 50% a year ago. Clearly, people were worried when this was taken a few weeks ago about the tariffs, about, what direction is the United States going. I think in my own perspective, I think it's too early to say, and I know it's easy to get panicked over, freezes in government and programs, but we don't really know what the upshot is going to be down the road. We have had times in our past when, for various reasons, our influence in the world has taken hits. After the Vietnam War, or during the Vietnam War, when photographs of Abu Ghraib came out, in the Bush administration, the Iraq going into Iraq, and things have come back. In my own opinion, I think it means that we need to expand citizen to citizen exchanges and expand some of these, person to person, those, contact. But I'd like to hear what the two of you have to say. Mary, what is your perspective?
Sure. I think, Margot, I have a more positive outlook on it. I mean, I think if we look at the phrase of losing soft power, we basically are saying that we don't have the power to create connections. And I think more than ever, we have the power to create people-to-people connections. I mean, if you look at AI and what AI is doing for young people, for businesses, the ability to create digital connections, I know for a lot of people that's been alarming. But I think that there's a world out there of people who are very, very keen to leverage AI for positive social impact. And if I look at what I do, which is to try and reach communities that would benefit from a music program, from a songwriting program, from a performance program, from a collaboration, which is really at the heart of what we do, there's a lot of ways that AI and private industries can help with that. And so I think if we look at, I mean, even if I break it down, if I think about if I were to go back to Pakistan, where I've been 3 times, or to Russia, or to Azerbaijan, there's so many more tools to do advanced work, to think about what people are listening to, what are they interested in, how can you prepare in advance of going? I know when I went on these various tours, I always wished I had had more time to prepare. I wish I knew more about them. And now there really are these tools where you can find that out, and you can collaborate virtually. So we always think at the end of a tour, oh, I wish we could create a much more sustainable model. So it isn't just bands going over, or theater artists going over, or dancers. And now there is. And people are virtually connected. They're comfortable with it. That's how young people communicate. So for us to propose programs that are in person, because I believe in that, I'm a big believer in the last 3 feet. I actually say I feel like we go beyond 3 feet in our programs. But I think that, coupled with all of the opportunities that can happen online, create a great opportunity for organizations and programs, and particularly individuals who are interested in making an impact.
Well, and Mary, I just want to add, I remember one of the things that really hit me through the Vysotsky-Dillon exchange was when a conversation with some of the young musicians, and one Russian said, when he was selected to come, his family said, don't go, like, because it was, tension was so high. I mean, I think it was already war with Ukraine, and yet he had the bravery to come, and then was so glad because of what he had learned and done and been able to accomplish through the making of music and relationships. So
I remember that well. I mean, this was a young man, probably 21. And I had many conversations with him about whether or not he should come. And when we interviewed him about his experience, his first word was, "This was a miracle, an absolute miracle." And he described to me, which was so familiar to me, having been in Russia so many times, he described to me the conversations he had with his family around their kitchen table, and his parents and his grandparents saying, you shouldn't go, these are the reasons you shouldn't go. And he was wonderful, because he said, I just cannot wait to go home and tell them that they were wrong. And he did, and he's been back since, and we keep in close contact with them. But that was a very special program, because it was also not too long after COVID. And so we had all these young people who were so isolated, and to have them here and to have them together with possibly the most welcoming community, which is the Twin Cities in Minnesota, was really a special opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. How about you, Ross? What are your thoughts about whether we're losing or whether there are opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. What do you think?
Sure. Well, first, I think what you said about polling is important. But in a kind of the reverse sort of way, there have been throughout our lives periods when this or that American action overseas or development in the United States created terrible headlines and led to a lot of skepticism in other countries about how much they like the United States after all. And whether it was President Reagan's decision to install intermediate range nuclear forces in Europe in the early 1980s, or President Bush's decision to go into Iraq in 2003. If they produce these headlines, they're not necessarily dispositive when it comes to understanding a long-term trend. I think what Mary said too about both the opportunities and the potential for effective soft power engagement with other societies and the pre-existing plethora of tools and the new ones that more modern communications than I'm capable of dealing with effectively are at play. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with that. When it comes to U.S. policy and how I think policymakers would want to think about this, I think one would want to be a little bit more skeptical, and
Wait,
recognize
skeptical of what?
skeptical in that the effective exercise of American soft power to uh, more directly or less indirectly support our objectives in the world, I think are influenced by some things, by some important headwinds. What many perceive as American inconsistency, less effective governance, less reliability, and certainly a lot of questions on that last word being raised today and in the halls of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Concerns, changes that have to do with more diverse centers of power in the world, other countries more effectively promoting their own interests through soft power mechanisms, better competitors, maybe is a way of putting it. Changes associated with social media and the way people get their information that create, certainly, as Mary noted, creates gobs of new and interesting opportunities to communicate, but also I think represents more communication. And then, of course, the underlying problem in our country or issue in our country of a fatigue among a substantial sector of our population with an outsized American role in the world and a feeling that our own problems at home need to be more effectively dealt with. So I think there's some contrary pieces there that if I were a policymaker advising a policymaker in Washington, I'd we have to be honest and direct about those, and I think be creative in what we do, and absolutely not cut off the day-to-day, week by week, monthly, yearly, the ongoing effort that's essential with each generation and each year, each period that goes by to establish relationships, make friends for our country, or even just find ways to communicate more effectively with other publics elsewhere in the world. It's an important end in itself. It can help and support American policy objectives in the world, or interests at least in the world. And we have to keep plugging away, as I think Mary so eloquently stressed.
So kind of building on that, I think of and I'm looking at some of the questions that people are talking about, this idea that, these programs like VOA or FERL are getting cut off, fundamental institutions that punched above their weight in winning the Cold War. I think one question that I would ask is, there was these programs came out because of a consensus. There was a consensus in the United States, in the US government in particular, that, these programs were important. Coming out of World War I and World War II, we wanted to have peace in the world. In the Cold World, when, as you said, thermonuclear weapons were hanging over us, we needed to have, peace and safety, and the best way to do it was through programs and reaching other people and building relationships. Has that consensus ended, do you think? Or what you were saying, people, and people in general being more focused on individual concerns and less on the US playing a global role.
I don't know whether that consensus exists in the same way, actually. I think there is widespread, there certainly, and even relatively recently, widespread support among political leaders of both parties, to say nothing of other leaders in our country, for America in the world, and our being out there in a period when competition from China, from Europe, friendlier power, obviously, and from other places, kind of complicates our future and raises questions. We need to have friends, and we need to be out there engaging effectively. There is also strong sentiment that, I think, at least I perceive this, that not every program that we have had, not every funding mechanism, not every somewhat duplicative scholarship program or exchange program. Maybe we don't need all of those things. Or certainly there shouldn't be a kind of, they shouldn't exist in perpetuity, or an understanding that they must exist in perpetuity. I think there is widespread consensus that our country faces acute fiscal problems. You could take all the money that goes into all of these programs and not make the slightest dent in our fiscal problems. But that awareness, or that belief in substantial sectors of the American public, and certainly American leadership, that conditions how these things get approached, and to pretend otherwise isn't going to get you anywhere. This is tough business. I think it will require more private money, of which there seems to be quite a bit in the United States, to fund programs that accomplish many of the same things in an era when U.S. government funding may become somewhat harder. And I would argue that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. In a sense, that's the American way: private initiative, private citizens groups engaging. In the 19th century, it was missionaries and businessmen who went out and did the soft power stuff. And we don't want to go back quite to that model, and there are a lot of good reasons not to. But there also maybe some good reasons to look at private solutions where they can make sense.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with you, Ross, that you can look at all sorts of tools and try them out, and some of them are just not going to work. And some of them are going to be a success on day one. I mean, if you look at music, for example, I mean, you can go into a community you've never been in, and you have no idea what song is going to resonate with them, or what rhythms are going to resonate with them. And I think that's one of the things we do. We'll sing a folk song, we'll sing, a polka song. I mean, rock and roll always works, by the way. It always works. So bring out rock and roll, and that will connect you with people. But I really feel like there has to be a lot of tools at our disposal. And storytelling for me is one of the tools that I think is really important. With all of the translation devices that people have at their disposal, the way to reach people is through the stories of their day-to-day lives and through the stories of our day-to-day lives, and connect with them in that way. And I also think it takes ownership and people saying that they own this particular content out of the equation, because no one can tell your own story. And if you give people that power and you tell them, we are interested in what you have to say, we're interested in how you live, and we're honored that you're interested in us, then it creates immediate connection and a platform for building other relationships and programs.
Thank you. I'm looking at, there are 3 questions there. I agree. Sean Warner says, why is it now less important than it was during the Cold War for these programs? If anything, it's more important. And I think that's what you just said, Mary. I mean, we're living with such divisions in the world, divisions in our country, and these programs help to bridge those. If anything, we do need to have, I think what Ross was saying is that they don't necessarily all have to be funded by the US government. And I think that Mary Lewis Grow has asked a question about diplomats who are not in public diplomacy. Diplomats overseas are out meeting with people, and if they're musicians, they're playing with local groups, or they're helping with nonprofits. They're definitely out there relating with host country citizens. So I think there are a lot of those opportunities, and much more now through some of these internet social media platforms where you can actually reach more people, and you can have good conversations like this. We may not be in the same room, but we definitely are relating to each other. And yes, there will be countries that are filling the gaps. I mean, we're seeing that. It would be stupid for China to not be expanding its soft power in any way that it can. And there are surveys that show that they are getting better at these things, and that people around the world, particularly in Asia, where they're particularly active, are responding well to these. Many countries use various tools. I mean, before there was the VOA, there was the BBC. And part of the problem for us is that Americans don't know these programs. I mean, these programs, most of these programs, except the exchange programs that actually put a high school student in your school, or the Fulbright program that of course everyone knows, but most people, the programs were outward directed, so that Americans didn't know about these programs. So there isn't always a body of support for these programs. I mean, granted, the people I'm guessing on this that are in this webinar and with us tonight, a vast majority of them, I would guess, were exchange students themselves, worked in businesses overseas, are interested in these things and appreciate soft power and the relationship building. The important thing is to get that broader, I think. And so what I would like to do is also move to, and I love this this question that Ralph Beha has just asked. We need to support our international students here in the US. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think it gets down to, what can we do? And when the Fulbright program, when all of these exchange programs, suddenly funding was stopped, it's been resumed. But imagine being a Fulbright student who suddenly has to pay rent, and there's no money in the stipend to do that. Well, some universities jumped in and said, we will pay for the rest of your, before the, your rest of your stay here, or we will help you get support, which is the American way to jump in and help people. And so we can do this. I absolutely agree that we can help. I mean, the local university where we are, just over in Wisconsin, has a program where citizens can host foreign students, for holidays in your home. Introduce them to and I've been thinking I want to do that. Well, I'm going to do that. There are little steps that you can take to help, academic institutions. Academic institutions are going to have their funding cut. They're not going to be able to take on all of this, and they have their own battles to fight. So we need to help. And I think everybody needs to think what is important to them. For me, it's international students, exchange students. It's also museums. So I'm supporting the art museums in this area and getting connections through that form of culture. So I think I'd love to hear some of the ideas that you have, either Ross and or Mary.
Sure, I can suggest a few things. I think looking at what you can do locally is really important. And I love what you said, Margot, that there are a lot of things that you can do for foreign students, for other people who are, for any particular reason, in need of support. So I would look at those opportunities, look at the organizations that are supporting people already and try and fit into that network. But I would also look at how young people are communicating and think about how we can best use that speed, that savvy, the familiarity with technology, familiarity with AI, continue to keep up to date on all of the tools available to us for those of us who do international programming. And finally, I would just say continue to travel when and if you can, because it's just a reminder of the incredible communities out there and the incredible wealth of humanity that we as Americans can benefit from interacting with.
Ross, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I think what you said about taking action at the local level and particularly international students is important. Global Minnesota, one of the co-sponsors of this event, began as the Minnesota International Center at the University of Minnesota, whose purpose was to help foreign students coming to the U to get acclimated, to find their way around, to make arrangements to live in this country, to help them solve problems, get to know people, other foreign students, as well as other Americans. Global Minnesota continues to do that. It has a program that sends international students, mostly graduate students, here at the U and perhaps at other institutions, out into public schools in the Twin Cities, Mankato, and elsewhere around the state to meet kids, little kids. This is elementary school students. The students see a foreigner, they get to hear a foreign language, they learn a little bit about, whatever the country may be. And I think, that's important, real important, actually. And that foreigner sees a slice of America they're not going to get any other way. The impact from those that I've talked to who've done this is just tremendous for that foreign student. Global Minnesota members bring people to dinner in their homes, arrange programs for foreign students, a range of other things. Global Minnesota may not be the only organization in the Twin Cities that does that, but I think it's very important. And I think just to segue from that, I think a second thing that people can do that are interested in is to find organizations working in this space that they're interested in and support them. Global Minnesota is one. There are other World Affairs Council type of organizations in our area, including East-West Connections, that carry out a range of activities to promote public understanding of what's going on in the world, and have meetings that are open meetings that are arranged with foreign visitors that come here, foreign diplomats from Washington, but also others. arrange business and commercial programs on business and commercial issues with Minnesota businessmen and foreign groups that may come here. Other relationships, it's relationships. If those kinds of things interest viewers here, join one of those organizations, become a volunteer, because most of these organizations are all volunteer or largely volunteer organizations, certainly depend on them in order to be able to carry out their work. And they especially rely on volunteers to actually meet with and actually talk with internationals who come here. So there's a ton of opportunity, there's a ton of need, and a ton of impact that can be had by those who engage with groups working in this area toward to promote our country and our interest in dialogue and relationships with others around the world.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you for Ross. I absolutely agree. And I also want to respond to a question that Shelley Cross sent, which is our government interested in knowing what private institutions are doing? For example, I was a physician at the Mayo Clinic, thank you very much, for 32 years. And during that time, I taught in Ethiopia and in Mongolia. I made friends with physicians at the Burdenko Institute in Moscow and was there several times attending conferences and interacting with colleagues. This summer, I will be a camp counselor in Latvia. Does the government know what is going on in the private sector? And I guess my no, just to answer your question, they could not know the scope of what's going in the public sector, in the private sector. But I think they know that things are going in the private sector, and hallelujah, thank you for all of these things that you are doing and that you continue to do. One of my favorite exchanges was through People to People International. They had after the breakup of the Soviet Union, they had some fantastic volunteer organizations that said, some of the things were partially funded by the U.S. government, some were not at all, who said, I want to help in Russia or wherever. And I remember there was and I'm thinking it was Tucson, but it could have been Tempe in Arizona, that the National Guard, first of all, someone who was in the city government said, I want to help in Russia, I want to create a relationship, and was told, how about Kazakhstan? And this person told me, Kazakhstan? I don't even know where that is. But then developed through the National Guard, the Arizona National Guard, this incredible partnership that had to do with search and rescue and mountain rescue in particular. It went on to have exchanges between teachers that went both ways. And when a Russian group of teachers came and American teachers were taking them around, a spouse of one of the American teachers said, I'm a policeman and why can't we have an exchange with the police? And pretty soon they were exchanging, and building a relationship that way. These things are wonderful. I mean, as a physician, one of the great partnerships that I remember was between Georgia and Georgia. So it was our state of Georgia and the former state Republic of Georgia. And it was a medical exchange. So it was, Emory and Grady Hospital, all these different hospitals. And they did things like they created a nursing service because nursing was a completely different thing. When Ross and I were in Georgia just a few years ago, there was still an ongoing relationship between the our Georgian hospitals and rotating clinicians who would come to various clinics in Georgia. I mean, these things, the fact that that carries on for 20 years is just witness to the power that relationships have. So great. Good for you for doing these. And please, anyone, does the government want to know about these? Yes. And I would encourage you when you're in Latvia or wherever you are to get in touch with the embassy and let them know that you're there. And maybe they can help. They can build on what you're doing. You can maybe provide an entree that they can bring a cultural ambassador or something, or, sponsor a different kind of a relationship, Yes, wherever I served overseas, I was delighted to know what else was going on and if there are ways that we could collaborate. So I'm just trying to think if we have more questions that we haven't responded to. I saw that Todd has been jumping in and responding to a lot of people directly as well to say you want to follow up. The Russian American organizations throughout this country, that's a great way to facilitate connections, a shared language, shared cultural background. What Mary was talking about, what the rest of us have to learn is inherently there. The common cultural icons and things, shared history. That's a great way to be involved and to make connections.
I'd like to close too, Margot, with one brief exchange I had with a friend whose country had gone through a very, very difficult period, and I was feeling somewhat sad and discouraged one day, and she said, you really can't spend time being sad. And she said, the only thing you can do is be active. And that was such a great lesson to me, and such an important thing to remember every day. And so I would say, to follow up on your suggestions, that if you, one, have an idea for an exchange, for a way to work internationally, there is a way to make it happen. It may not be the way it's traditionally been done or the way it's been done over many, many years, but there is a way to make programs happen, and you just need to be a little bit more creative and resourceful and bring in a larger community to brainstorm with you, and just to keep those ideas coming and keep on doing what we can do in this moment.
Thank you very much. I think that's a wonderful way to end this discussion. Would you agree, Todd?
Yes, listen, I've, a number of thoughts came up. Sean raised a very good point, Sean Warner, that basically it's more important now than during the years that often it was seen as part of a normal program. And the fact that we even have to discuss it, is a commentary on both the state of the world and what's happening. Also, I think that what's interesting is Shelley pointed out an interesting concept, that there are a number of countries where we have difficult relationships. It's become more difficult in Russia, obviously, with formal organizations. It's become more difficult in China and in some of the organizations that we had worked with previously. But there are places that are open, the Baltics, and where Shelley's going to be, the idea of Central Asia, where they're looking for relationships, often with the United States, because quite frankly, nobody is standing at the border trying to break into China or Russia at the moment. I mean, this is still, if they're frustrated with us, it's because often we don't follow through sometimes with what we are supposed to stand for. And the thing that really strikes you is the fact that there are thousands of actions taken individually and by organizations that become the basis of soft power. It's based, though, upon what Ross said, was that people need to take action. And it's individual action by contacting, by group working in organizations, by contributing to those organizations. The thing that frightens me the most is that there's a regrowth of nuclear power and the potential of expansion of nuclear weapons, which make all of this more and more relevant. The great irony of this is the way we phrase concepts. Soft, one of the things that we pointed out tonight is that soft is hard. Soft power often is more effective than hard power, especially if you don't know what hard power means tomorrow. And so the question starts to be, how do we do that and do that individually? And I'm glad there are so many organizations. Once again, I wish to thank our speakers, Mary, Ross, and Margot. I wish to thank our wonderful co-sponsors, Global Minnesota, Museum of Russian Art, Zedekalo, the Minnesota Committee on Foreign Relations, and the Russian Studies Department at Macalester College. On May 1st, which will be our next program, we'll be showing a movie which will go over 4 days that you can tune in anytime you want. It's one of the most famous movies by Dmitry Krylov, who has his own laboratory in New York. And it's a movie from about 3 years ago. And we're very appreciative to the groups in Moscow, the group in Moscow, that Stage Moscow, that has provided this for us. We will have a discussion on May 1st with a leading American actor, a brilliant academic from St. Olaf, and somebody at Carleton who's a brilliant academic also. So we'll be sending that out the next number of days, and we hope that you can join us for that. So thank you. I'm glad to everybody who joined us. When the recording is finalized in terms of making sure that everything comes through, we will send it out through our social media systems. And if you can, send it to other people, because I think this is a subject worth talking about across the country, because there are a number of implications that go through the future of the United States and how we fit. So with that, we thank you for being here, and we thank you all, our commentators, who were wonderful and brilliant as always. And so have a good night. As we say, spasibo большое. Пока.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
all.